Hi, I'm Danielle. In May 2018, I earned the APICS CLTD certification, and that stands for Certified in Logistics, Transportation, and Distribution. And ever since I passed, I've been asked many times, Danielle, how did you pass? The main thing that people really want to know when they ask that question is, what did you study and how did you study? Or they want to know what my resources were and the process that I used. Today's video is all about both of those things. So stick around and I'll share with you how I passed the APICS CLTD. When I talk to people about how I passed the CLTD exam, they're always more interested in the thing that I didn't do versus what I did do. So let's first talk about what I did not do to pass the CLTD exam. I did not take an APICS instructor-led course. I also did not use the APICS online learning system. The reason I did not take an APICS instructor-led course is because self-study is much more consistent with my learning style and my learning preference than an instructor-led course. If your learning style is more consistent with a course and having an instructor guide you through the material, then consider that option. That option may be the best for you. Independent study or self-study is not right for everyone, but I knew for me that would match with my best learning style. One other thing I did not do, I did not use the APICS online learning system. I chose not to use the APICS online learning system for a couple of different reasons. The first reason was cost. When I took the CLTD, I was not sponsored by the company I worked for at the time. There, was no reimbursement or anything like that. I paid for my exam and all of my materials out of my own pocket. And I did that because I wanted to invest in myself. Getting my certification was an investment in me and my growth and professional development. Well worth the investment. I would suggest the same for you, especially if your company does not offer sponsorship or reimbursement or that sort of thing. It's worth it to invest in yourself. As a matter of fact, it's one of the best investments that you can make, one of the best ROIs or return on investment that you can find out there. Back to the CLTD. Another reason why I didn't use the APICS online learning system is because I felt confident that I could prepare for the exam without it. What I chose to do instead was use the exam content manual for the CLTD and the 10 books listed in the bibliography to prepare for the exam instead of using the online learning system. This is not to discourage you from taking a course or using the online learning system. This is simply me sharing how I passed, which happened to involve an alternative to both of those options. Now, a disclaimer. This method is not common. As a matter of fact, I do not know anyone else that is prepared for the CLTD in this way. Everyone I know has taken an APICS instructor-led course and or used the online learning system to do self-study. But this is my story, this is how I passed, and it is an alternative if an instructor-led course or the online learning system are not available to you, or if for whatever reason you choose not to use them. Now that we covered what I didn't do, let's talk about what I did. I mentioned before the resources I used instead of an online learning system or a course was the exam content manual and the 10 books listed in the bibliography at the end of the exam content manual. I bought or rented each of those 10 books and read every chapter that the exam content manual referenced in each of those books. So I read through the exam content manual, then I read through each of the 10 books. The first book is the APICS Dictionary, so I didn't read that cover to cover. I read all of the key terms that are also listed in the exam content manual, and also made a supplementary list of other key terms that weren't included on that, but that were relevant just from what I read and from some other resources. But I knew there were some other terms and phrases that I needed to know in order to be successful both on the exam and, even more importantly, in a logistics, transportation, and distribution career after the certification. So all of the terms that I defined, I then made flashcards for. And that is how I covered the very first book of the exam content manual. The second through the 10th book listed are textbook type books that cover topics that you would expect on a exam related to logistics, transportation, and distribution. Things like transportation, international logistics, and logistics within the context of supply chain. Those 9 books I read, not cover to cover, but I read every single chapter that the exam content manual listed as being relevant to the exam. So I broke up those 9 books and I read some of the more interesting ones up front, but then kind of sprinkled them in between some of the ones that weren't quite as interesting. But in the course of 4 months, I read all 9 of those books, in addition to all of the key terms in that 10th book, the dictionary. And while I was reading, I made notes for every chapter, highlighted the books. Some books I bought on paper or paper format, some books I bought in electronic format, but I made notes in the margins for the books I owned. For the books that I didn't own, I used paper to write the notes, but I made notes for all of the books. And when I got through or to the end of the last book, I spent about 2 weeks, because it only took me about 3 to 3.5 months to actually read all 10 of those books or get through all 10 of those books. So the last 2 or 3 weeks before my exam date, I reviewed my flashcards and I reviewed all of the notes that I took from all the books that I read. One other thing that I did during the course of reading those books was I did the practice problems and case studies in those books. Now I didn't do every single one, but I did work through at least some of them just to make sure I understood how to answer or solve those problems. And for the case studies, I made sure that I understood the concepts around them, what decisions and trade-offs there were, because those sorts of things were relevant to the CLTD. When you choose not to take an APICS instructor-led course and you choose not to use the online learning system, you do not have access to practice exams. That can be a problem for some people. At the time of recording this, I have not found any other resource for CLTD practice exams other than the APICS online learning system or through an APICS course. So if you're not comfortable taking the exam without having taken a practice exam or done practice questions, do not choose this method. I was comfortable with that, but that doesn't mean that you'll be comfortable with it. The reason why I was comfortable with it is because of my past experience on another APICS exam, and because I felt confident that if I could master the problems in those 9 books, that I could master or be able to answer questions accurately on the test. So that's probably the biggest risk of studying or preparing using this method. So take that into consideration when you consider whether or not you're going to use the APICS materials and take a course. Another question that I'm asked often about passing the CLTD is how long it took. Each week of studying, I dedicated about 10 to 20 hours, usually more like 15 to 20 hours, but that's how much time I was able to spend outside of working full-time and the other things in my schedule. But studying 10 to 20 hours a week, I was able to prepare fully in 4 months. Before we end, I have one more thing I'd like to share with you. Another reason why I chose to study for the CLTD using this alternative method is because I knew that I could pass. And not only did I know that I could pass, but I knew I could help other people pass using that same method. I knew there were other people out there like me that either couldn't or didn't want to use the online learning system or take a course. For whatever reason, those options just weren't best for them or were not even an option. So I did not want others to feel like they couldn't get their CLTD if they couldn't buy the online learning system or they couldn't take an APICS instructor-led course. When I was preparing for the exam, I had not only this video, but this channel and all the things that are to come with this channel in mind, because I truly have a passion for supply chain, professional development, certifications, and helping others get their certification and take their career to new heights. It's not just a phrase, it's not just a saying, it's something that I truly believe and I'm passionate about. So when you make your decision to get your certification, whether it's your CLTD, CPIM, CSCP, even if it's a non-APICS certification, consider all your options. Whatever you choose, make sure that that option is the best option for you in your situation at that time, and make that investment in yourself and that commitment to yourself. Today's question of the day is, What questions do you have about the APICS CLTD? Think about it and let me know, whether it's a question about the certification in general, the exam itself, preparing for the exam. Let me know all the questions or any questions that you have about the APICS CLTD certification. Thanks for watching and for your time. If you like this sort of content about supply chain exams and exam-related topics, consider subscribing. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and more than anything, please share this video with anyone that you know that it will help.